And it is with pleasure that we welcome you to the Master Series events initiated by CIIM as part of the research activities of the MSc in Financial Law and International Taxation, empowered by the Cyprus International Businesses Association, in regards to Cyprus Agile, the new EU investment policy, trade and financial services. And this is the first session of the discussion, which is dedicated to the Brexit withdrawal agreement and professional education, the impact on the financial industry's professionals. The key speaker is Professor Christopher Bovis. He's the Professor of International Business Law at the University of Hull, visiting professor in MSc in Financial Law and International Taxation at CIIM, and advisor for the United Nations, European and national governments. The discussion raises awareness about the UK academic and professional qualifications, with an emphasis on the legal, finance, and accountancy professions under the EU-UK Brexit agreement. Brexit affects the academic qualifications since UK degrees become third country degrees and will need to be assessed in recognition by GISATs. Professional qualifications acquired from the UK is no longer automatically equivalent. The debate explores the Cyprus educational industry's opportunities regarding EU students, resulting from partnerships with UK actors. And in addition, online education is growing in strength in a short period of time, and this may have some repercussions on the local education industry. So we are also discussing the role of the local regulatory authorities on the matter. And the Brexit saga does not end here. The UK finance industry is a leading provider of financial services in Europe, but the question is whether it maintains its position. Is there more space for other regional actors? In all this, we have to also look at everything from the point of view of COVID, which has pushed for more digitalization in our business practices. And the geographic factor that has been a disadvantage for Cyprus is neutralized. Digitalization is transforming the tax industry. More and more of the earnings flow to the web giants, who will soon be subject to specific tax rules. Consequently, Cyprus's international tax policy is to seek for new tailored services, and this needs to consider the digital economy, which will necessitate a drastic revamp of the way that we set our tax structures. Redesigning academic and professional qualifications for accounting, finance, and tax advisories in this landscape needs to be urgently studied, and linking those qualifications to new industry sectors, attracting genuine investment for the local economy is what is needed. Professor Bovis sets the framework, and we have not double speakers to give specific insights on Cyprus's implementation of the conditionalities provided by the agreement. The topic is broadened by asserting COVID's influence on two distinguished sectors, the educational and the financial services industry, with a forward-looking glance. And the panelists are prominent experts in their field. Professor Giorgos Sokratis Mirlis is the chairman of the Cyprus Council of Recognition of Higher Education Qualifications, GISATs. Mr. Leonidas Paschalidis is the Deputy Secretary General of the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce and Industry and a key factor in the Brexit negotiations. Mr. Kyriakos Iordanou is the General Manager of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Cyprus, ICPAC. Mr. Laris Rahimi is the former Coordinator of Lawyers Qualification and Training, Cyprus Legal Council with the Cyprus Bar Association. And of course, we have Mr. Christos Theophilou, Tax Advisor, Professional Qualification Provider with TaxAn. A Q&A session will follow with questions submitted through the chat function of Zoom, and the questions and conclusions are then driven by Dr. Eleni Apostolidou of CIIM, Director of MSc in Financial Law and International Taxation. Professor Bovis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, dear friends, the privilege, a pleasure, and an honor to be with you this afternoon, debating something which is in the heart of our industry, educational, professional services industry, and also something in the heart of the Europeans as part of the recent exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union. The withdrawal agreement was triggered almost 5 years ago. The United Kingdom spent 4 years discussing nothing, more or less, and 1 year discussing about fish. But nothing on services, nothing on the 80 or 85% of the industry that provides gross domestic product to the whole European Union and their member states. They forgot, or they withdrew any type of compromise, negotiation, or agreement until further. In fact, they kicked the ball in the grass in the long term in order to get through the first transitional period, exit the European Union with a very basic treaty on goods and nothing on services. Today, I will spend some time discussing with you the framework for qualifications, professional qualifications, recognition, and some principles that allow one of the most distinguished and fundamental principles of European law that we have, and we have witnessed its goods and ability to provide integration in the common market. I'm referring to the right to provide services and the freedom of establishment. This is the umbrella fundamental right and freedom that is permeated into individuals, citizens of the European Union, companies, in order to benefit, in order to create that concept of free trade. The beneficiaries of the freedom of establishment are individuals, that means self-employed, but also companies. Companies through two means: either the primary establishment, the seat of a company into a country, or secondary establishment. This is important now because the United Kingdom realized that they need financial services more than they need fish or goods, and they're desperate to at least create a continuity of the passporting principle for financial services: banking, insurance, reinsurance, and also investment. In other European countries, one of the biggest markets in the world, which is next to them, next to the United Kingdom. And they realized that they forgot about it. And they're desperate to differentiate between the two concepts: the primary establishment, the seat, and the home control mechanism for not only taxation, but also regulatory environment for financial services, but always the importance of the secondary establishment through subsidiaries and through branches. The European Commission plays hardball as of yesterday, and they do not recognize secondary establishment, to bypass the system that doesn't have an agreement in place to provide a kind of a continuation of the passporting rights for financial services. More on that later on, and more of that later on this year and the year before, because this is an ongoing saga. Back into our topic, which is the provision of services and the right of establishment that relates to the professionals. The individual professional has certain rights endorsed by the treaty and European law. The right of establishment into another member state, into another market, concentrates on the notion of self-employment, which indicates activities of an industrial or commercial character, activities of craftsmen or craftswomen, activities of professions which are recognized in a member state. Individuals also have the right to act as a shareholder, as an active or passive investor through stocks and shares. And finally, an individual has the right to participate in economic activities through company directorships. They need some elements of recognition of that identity of a European individual into each other's territory. The rights which are conferred to individuals through European law is entry, residence, and departure, exit from a market. Access to employment, access to a profession and employment, equal treatment between other subjects of law and practice, and of course, recognition of the qualification, which underpins all the above. Without a qualification, without a recognition, you cannot do the above. You cannot have equal treatment. You cannot self-employ yourself as a professional. You cannot enter, reside, or even depart of a specific market. So the bottom and the end and the beginning of the whole debate is that notion of mutual recognition of qualification. It's so important that is embedded in the treaty, in the European Treaty, as part of the constitutional requirement for the European citizen to make it easier for persons to take up and pursue activities as self-employed persons, as part of economic activity providers and recipients. The treaty, the European Treaty, allows institutions and member states, governments, to act on qualified majority. You understand that the decision-making process in the European Union is quite complicated and requires either unanimity for important issues, or for more important issues that require qualified majority. That means a type of a decision-making that corresponds into priorities for member states, regions, or the collective part of the majority of the European states. That is important. And remember that it's a type of ordinary legislative procedure that underpins the notion of mutual recognition in Europe. In cases for sensitive professions, such as medical, allied, and pharmaceutical professions, that progressive abolition of any restrictions, any kind of hindrances of exercising somebody's profession into another member state market is dependent upon coordination for the conditions for accepting the qualification and the practice. The two obstacles there: accepting somebody's qualification from another member state and accepting or recognizing practice, the ability to exercise a profession, taking into account years of experience previously from entering that specific market. And that requires coordination. Remember that coordination is important also for the future arrangement between the UK and the European Union. UK now is a third country that relates into a number of issues concerning the fundamental rights. However, previously the UK was a full member, and quite often the UK had a good size of majority for qualifications endorsed by European member states for the professions that we're discussing at the moment. The professional organizations and the professions, the academic qualification of professionals are originating from the United Kingdom, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. The European Union moved bravely from unanimity to qualified majority, to ordinary legislative procedure. And as a result, enacted a directive, European Directive 2005-36 on mutual recognition of higher education qualification. That's the basic. That's the basic for our debate and our future debate about how that mutuality principle is working. Mutual recognition of higher education is important, but throws the ball into the member state to establish specific institutional structures to recognize and accept qualifications from other member states. In Cyprus and in every other country, that concept of mutual recognition has to be filtered through these organizations. Therefore, it creates a hierarchy in the receipt of the freedom to provide services and the right of establishment through that specific structure, institutional structure endorsed by the member state. In addition to the Directive of Mutual Recognition, we have a directive concerning services, the Services Directive, a year after 2005, 2006, 123, the Services Directive, which focuses on authorization schemes and frameworks such as license, accreditations, authorization of a profession, and also registration in order to provide a specific service or specific profession. Any restriction concerning the Services Directive, which is important, is prohibited unless they do not discriminate. It's completely equivalent to everybody. They do not override reasons to public interest, and they do not provide any attainment of the objective by less restrictive measures. In other words, they're proportionate. The professional recognition after Brexit is a step back. It's clearly a weak spot of the whole trade and cooperation agreement signed by the European Union and the United Kingdom a couple of months ago. The new European EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement is not attempting to deal with that hot potato, the topic of services, and also the recognition of professional qualifications between the two regions, the UK and Europe as a bloc. What the agreement means for professional recognitions in the accountancy sphere, for example, is that what else is relevant for professionals is a matter for a contested and hot debate, and for future policy and legislative action. They recognize that. The Trade and Commercial and Cooperation Agreement says that there is no automatic mutual recognition of professional qualifications. However, they open the door for a framework to lay out the specifics for allowing professional bodies, professional institutions, to move in these directions in the future. That indicates bilaterality. That indicates a number of individual arrangements and deals. There is some specific protection for lawyers against anybody else, the accountants, the auditors, anybody else, the engineer that has a professional, academic and professional link into the provision of service. For lawyers, it's a specific reference in the TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Lawyers advising on UK law or international law are back into the old-fashioned way of recognizing and accepting qualifications. They insisted on that and they won. The UK won on that specific thing, and the European Union allowed that to happen. The agreement allows also for bilateral recognition between regulators, between also authorized bodies. The reason for that, we can see a kind of a network emerging, a network for adapting a specific methodology for accepting, recognizing, and registering qualification and the aftermath of the qualification, which is the provision of the accredited qualification for the profession exercise. Is that what was expected between the UK and Europe, including Cyprus? The UK was pushing for something more ambitious. The UK wanted the cake, and they wanted to eat the cake and have it to look at the cake. Usually UK has a very aggressive attitude towards negotiations and diplomacy, but at the end they lose because they do not plan properly. In this case, the UK was pushing for the status quo, recognition provisions that happened in previous years, previous decades of the European integration in all services sector. And they're hoping for that highly, that they will win. They will probably roll the passport in principle for financial services, and everything else under the principle of mutual recognition. It will be exactly what the Services Directive and the Mutual Recognition Directive promised years and decades ago. However, it didn't happen. The reason for that is that the European Union did not concede on the idea. They started playing hardball. And you know why? Because they want to take away the competitive advantage of the United Kingdom on services, including financial services. And that's the opportunity for the smaller states, the periphery of the European Union, to take advantage of that. It's an opportunity for Cyprus, for financial services, adding professional investment, other aspects of that industry to benefit out of that demise of the leadership into the European market for a specific type of services. The trade and cooperation agreement between the European Union and the UK was broadly in line with any other free trade agreement the EU reached. The Canada-EU trade agreement, the CETA, the Japan-EU trade agreement, the current negotiations with the World Trade Organization, more or less have the same principle for services, which include the recognition of diplomas and qualifications and the ability to have that sort of exercising profession framework adapted. What are the actions for business today? Well, in the UK, there's a huge push, the huge priority to ensure that any employees which are currently providing cross-border services with regulated professions which are registered to protect their rights under the withdrawal agreement are somehow grandfathered. Meaning that before the period of the cutoff, before the exiting of the European Union, recognition is guaranteed. The grandfather principle is more or less accepted by the European Union and most of the member states. Not all of them, but most of the member states will accept unequivocally grandfathering recognition of qualifications, professional qualifications. In addition, there is an appetite to monitor requirements in every member state in order to respect regulated professions, accept the requirements, and also ensure appropriate steps are taken before any action happens to provide cross-border services, which includes not only monitoring and accepting and recognizing, but registering dual professional bodies, creating that bilateralism in the professional bodies to change residency and even requalifying to continue forward to provide services in each other's territory. It's complicated, it's extremely sensitive, it's very expensive potentially, but it's one way of looking at things for solving the issue. The professional recognition of qualifications is directly relevant for professionals seeking to move and work across the borders in some regulated and reserved professional activities. In the European Union, including the UK, statutory audit and the statutory auditors is regulated across the border. And there is a considerable diversity in national rules on what is not and what it is regulated in the accountancy sphere. There you have it, a completely different approach already emerging from the TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the auditor, the statutory auditor in the accountant. Why there's a difference? Well, we haven't figured it out yet. Perhaps the debate that we have, they will tell us some intricacies about the profession of the auditor and the accountant, and also the qualification system that might create a solution into that problem that we have. Professional recognition for regulatory purpose, not recognition, regulatory purposes, has impact on the broader market recognition for qualification. What are the relevant provisions for that? For example, the accountancy sector. The TCA is a clear step back from previous arrangements. Previous arrangements gave legal certainty over recognition procedures on a European-wide union base. Those procedures enabled professionals to avoid requalification from scratch and gave access to a so-called aptitude test within an adaptation period to show competence, probation in other words, and national law familiarity and requirements of a domestic market. That was the fait accompli in all jurisdictions, not only in the continental, but also Anglo-Saxon jurisdictions. For example, in Ireland, in common law, in civil law jurisdictions, it was the same, identical principles. Currently, there is no overarching system in place for the European Union UK recognition for accountancy. And indeed, all the professions that we mentioned, the legal profession, the profession that relates into the service for financial services, other than banking. On a more positive approach, the TCA establishes an overall architecture to develop any recommendations coming from professional bodies and professional qualifications to allow authorities between the UK and the EU to take control of the matter. That means away from governments. The TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, introduced a joint partnership council. Listen to that. It's just a devolved system of governance. The joint partnership council, which is entrusted to approve recommendations, most likely through a specialized committees for recognition of professional qualifications. That's an opportunity for the Cypriot structures to get on that opportunity, that joint partnership council voice, and create that link, that cooperation in order to solve any issue. For professional recognition between the United Kingdom and the European Union as a whole, the agreement looks to channel professional recognition for accountants. That's a priority. They need to prioritize that because they need accountancy, not only statutory accountancy, not auditing, but also accountancy. They needed to keep the trade and the actual flow of investments in a way prior to the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union. The compatibility of any respective agreements is undoubtedly very high. We're not talking cheese and chalk. It's more or less compatible systems and regimes that they need a complete reconfiguration from a different point of view, but its compatibility is assured, meaning that the UK government is committed to provide guidance to regulatory authorities and professional bodies to help benefit from that alignment, that compatibility. The UK government also wants to pursue other recognition paths. They seem especially keen to provide a fast track for audit, but also they appear to create a bilateral system of agreements between the UK and individual member states, a type of priority that would not breach equality principles, but it will create a priority for previous legacy countries between the United Kingdom and the European Union, such as Cyprus, for example, Malta, Gibraltar. Those entities, those parts of the European Union could benefit from that sort of bilateralism, fast track, may I say, prioritized way of approaching recognition of qualifications and also standards, acceptable standards to provide the profession. It's also important to understand why recognition arrangements between the UK and the European Union for statutory auditors could be addressed. While the Joint Partnership Council role is acknowledging the importance of statutory auditor, the mutual recognition of statutory auditor qualification and the exercise of profession between the UK and the European Union may be pursued better through the bilateral base, not through an agreement that is a blanket across the European Union. Legislation by the European Union allows that, allows the envisaging of the specific procedure for individual members to agree a reciprocal recognition for statutory auditor from third countries. Article 44 of the Joint Partnership Council and the agreement allows that. Perhaps you can take into account that. Perhaps you can pursue that. In practical terms, that article 44 replicates the arrangements of the recognition of statutory auditing in the European countries from previous years. That said, it would be preferable to have a time-efficient procedure by the Joint Partnership Council, that sort of organizational to oversee a lot of relations between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and create auditing, professional qualifications and recognition for accountancy, the legal firms, and also professional investment credentials to operate on at least a harmonized way, not uniform, but harmonized way across the European Union. What is the most important thing to remember is that in the preparation for the end of the transitional period of last year, don't forget the United Kingdom just left the European Union a couple of months ago. The end of the transitional period witnessed an implementation regime between the European Union and the United Kingdom that requires professional recognition as a priority, which was not addressed. I mentioned to you they spend a lot of time talking about fish and the ability to keep their fish and eat their fish as much as they want, but not on the actual really important matters, which is services. And that will come and haunt not only the deal and the negotiations, but also the actual structure of a framework that allows a continuation of the regime. Among these priorities, the United Kingdom regulators, the professional bodies, will be required to recognize individual holdings of other members of the European Economic Area qualification system, such as the economic area or Switzerland qualifications when they deem compatible in scope, level, and content. That's a worrying feature here. Not the EU countries, but the bigger family of the European integration, the EEA and Swiss practitioners, they have to contest compatibility of scope of a qualification, level, and content. The UK regulators will be able, but not required to do that, to provide a compensation measure system, a system that it will require, for example, an aptitude test, a quick and affordable test to verify not only the compatibility, the scope, and the content, but also the actual treatment of qualifications on a mutual perspective. That is the worrying factor, that you can develop a two-tier system post-Brexit between the UK and the continent, including the European Union, the economic area, or other specific bilateral frameworks that exist. I'd like to finish on a positive note. There will be a deal, there will be an agreement, probably not this year, perhaps later on, but the more opportunity is for bilateral success. Success of individual member states through their professional organizations and associations and organizational bodies that represent professionals in their own respective countries to strike a deal before the sort of harmonized common denominator approach for continuation of any mutuality principle for qualifications to ensure free movement of provision of services and the right to benefit from establishing professionals across the member states. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. I'm delighted to take any questions when you have time, and I look forward to contributions from other panelists. Thank you.
Professor Bovis, thank you very much for this presentation.